back to Wild and Free Art and part 2 of making an altered book. So this is what I've done so far, and I just wanted to share with you what I'm going to show you how to make today that I've done so far. So I just made a little pocket in the front there, and I made this double side pocket just on the first page. The next thing that I've done is this quadruple type pocket. So I've got 4 different pockets and that you can stack stuff in. I've also made a little flap with a little miniature notepad just made out of a scrap of ledger paper and stuck in. And I've also used the pages of the book itself to make a little envelope with a sliding closure, and I've added just a little piece of ephemera in there that I'll show you properly when I do the flip through when the book is finished. I've also made a little decorative border using pressed clovers and some tape, and I'll show you how I did that as well. I also made a little triangle pocket that you can just use as a tuck spot, and this triple layer type window. So you have one thing there. We've got a little window that works both ways to reveal what's on the other side. So in today's video, I'll just walk you through a few of these things that we've done, and the first thing I'm going to show you is how I made this quadruple pocket. So the first thing to do is to find a section that also gives you quite a bit of space for you to fold your pages, because you're going to need to use quite a few pages of your book for this. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm working my way from, let's say, the front pocket to the back pocket. So the smallest to the largest. And all I'm doing here is just folding the paper to the size that I want the pockets to be. And I'm just using one sheet of paper here. So just one page, folding it in half to the height that I want. And then I'm leaving the last one to full length because that's going to be the little pocket in there. And basically that's the basic structure. At this point, all we're going to do is look at decorating it and gluing it together. So here you see I'm just playing around with some ideas of what to use to decorate um, the slots, just to differentiate them and make it easier to see what there is to tuck everything into. I finally decided on this green cardstock strip, and I'm just cutting it to size, making sure that it's going to fit on the first slot. And then it's a matter of just gluing everything together once you've decided how you're going to decorate it and making all of the little slots. So in order to reduce bulk here, I've just ripped part of the page off and used that little bit that's left, the lip there, to reinforce the edge so that you don't have to worry about, um, tearing through the paper at that point. So I'm just going to glue the edge there and fold it in, press it down. And basically this is the idea that continues through and repeats through the entire system. So you glue the edge, fold it, glue on the decorative part, and then move on to the next one. My next step was to punch out all of the notches. So I did them in a cascading pattern on the front, and I'm going to do the same in this one here. So working my way top to bottom. You'll see I had a little struggle with the punch because it didn't like the thin paper, so I then eventually started using an extra piece of scrap paper underneath because it was making a mess. But basically I just punched from the back through to the front one in a cascade, And that gave us the little notches that we're going to need then to pull and put stuff in, and it's also a little decorative element as well. The next thing I did after I'd punched all the notches was to just ink the edges, because it's best to do that before you glue the whole thing together, as it is not an easy feat to do that afterwards, which I discovered with the first one. So yeah, this is experience spot talking right now. Once you've decided that it's been decorated the way you want, it's time to start making the pockets. So basically for the biggest one, I just glued a thin strip top and bottom, and then I repeated the process for the smaller ones. So again, thin strip at the top, thin strip at the bottom, and push it down until it sticks all the way through to the front one. I also decided to reinforce the back pocket by gluing together the page that was before it, so to make it a double page. That way it's a bit more sturdy as well. And that is it for the first one. The next thing we're doing is that little pocket plus side tuck um, notepad type page. And all you're going to need for this is a decorative paper. I used a book page, and your ruler, and some glue, and some ledger paper. The first thing I need to do is make that back pocket, and I'm just ripping and deciding at the height that I want it to be, and I'm basically just tearing out the one strip of the one page on the top, which is going to be where we're going to slide anything that we put in the pocket. And obviously I need to decorate that. So I am going to cut down the paper, the decorative paper, to size in height only, so not in width, because obviously we want it to wrap around. So I just marked it with a pencil and then I trimmed it down with my cutter and the ruler. Once it was the height I wanted, I just trimmed off the little rough edge, and I just double checked that it would be the right size. And obviously you see there's a tiny bit of a discrepancy, so I just tore off the extra piece. And then the next step is just to ink it and glue it down, pretty much, making sure that it has enough space to wrap around the page onto the other side. Once it's all glued, it was time to cut the notch, which of course I struggled with. The hole punch does not like this book's paper. I don't know why. Even with the two layers, it just would not work. So I fight with it a bit, but I eventually get the notch in once I decide to quadruple my piece of paper. So you get the notch in, and so you've basically prepared most of your pocket at this point. The next step was to glue the pocket closed. So just going to run a thin bead of glue on the side and bottom of the paper and glue it to the page next to it. At this point, it's time to make the little writing pad, writing space, notepad, however you want to call it. So I just folded the paper over and I got some ledger paper cutoffs that I have, and very easy. I just tore them and inked the edges, glued it on, and put a little piece of washi tape on as a decorative element. And I will go and decorate them properly again. I'll be decorating the book a bit better um, after this video and before the flip through. But I just wanted to show the kind of process and my thoughts when I was making all of these elements for this one. Next thing I worked on was the envelope with the sliding element, and again you just need some glue, some paper, Brad's decorative thing to use is the sliding closure, and some patience folding, and some washi tape. Washi tape is helpful. So what I did was, just to put a bit of space in between the two elements, was I glued two papers together. I'll probably decorate that somehow with something else. But now I'm making the actual envelope. So I'm folding the paper, which is going to be the front part of the envelope and is going to have the closure, to the height that I want it. And the other piece is going to fold over like the flap, and that's going to be the actual envelope piece. And that's the basic construction of the entire thing. So at this point, I am going to prepare the sliding closure. It's one of the little elements that was in the printing kit. I just cut it out, and since it was printed just on normal paper, it needs to be a bit stronger. And I glued it onto a piece of cardstock just to give it a bit more strength, and set that aside to dry while I made a choice on what kind of paper I wanted to use to decorate the envelope. Obviously, you don't have to decorate an envelope, you could just leave it the way it is, but I have decided to try and pull in all these different elements of green and whatnot in this book. So I fiddled with a few pages until I figured out the ones I wanted, and once I had decided, I cut everything down to size and glued it on. For the top flap, I wanted to make it a little bit longer, so I just kept I folded the paper in half a little bit and let it go down into the top of the envelope, just to make that flap a little bit longer and reinforce it as well. Once I had it the length I wanted it, I glued everything in as glued it all in, and decided to miter the corners just to make it look more envelope-like. And then it was time to add the sliding closure. I cut it out of the cardboard, made sure the oval was how I wanted it. Then I just did a quick sand and a quick ink. Then it was time to position it where I wanted it to be. I decided where I wanted it to be. I got my pokey tool, and basically I just poked through both the, the piece of cardboard, the closure, and the envelope, and slid a brad inside of it. And then just use a little piece of washi tape to cover the brad so it doesn't get caught on anything that you put inside the envelope. And the final step was just gluing the top and bottom of the envelope to actually turn it into an envelope. Um, and that is the envelope all done. The next bit that I worked on was making that invisible edge. This is a super easy and fun way of adding interest to any kind of junk journal pages. Basically, you just tear the page. In this case, I'm going to be gluing two pages together um, just to make them a bit thicker because that's how I'm working through this book. But you don't need two pages, you can do it on one. Anyways, and if you want to do any inking, this is the time to do it. And then all you have to do is take a piece of packing tape or scotch tape or just any clear tape that you have. And then you're going to want to add any pressed flowers or anything that you want to use to decorate it. I used some clover because that is part of the theme of all of the printables in my book. I just collected them from my garden and I dried them using my easy drying method. I can link it below. It's basically just ironing them. And anyways, you just place them into the position that you want. And then you add another piece of tape on top, burnish it down really well, cut off the excess, and that is a beautifully decorated page all done for you. The next piece that I worked on was a little triangular pocket. This is fairly straightforward. I'm sure many of us have made triangular pockets before. But I drew the pocket more or less how I wanted it, tore the page down to the height I wanted, and then folded it down at the angle more or less that I wanted, and trimmed off the excess, and then chose a decorative paper to put on top and cut that to the same angle. Contrary to the other one, I made this one a double pocket. So I actually used the decorative paper at a slightly lower level and then just um, glued the edges, the side, the bottom, and then the other inside bit. And therefore, I made a second little tuck spot for it. So yeah, this one was pretty straightforward. I think the video kind of explains itself, really. The last piece I'm going to show you is how I made the double window um, page spreads. So basically all you need is some decorative paper, some acetate, so plastic packaging is what I used, and your two images that you want to have seen through the windows. I already prepared mine in advance just to make it a bit faster for recording the video. Anyway, the first thing that I did was lay down what I wanted to be the base paper for my images to be on. This can be anything, pattern paper. You can leave the actual book pages however you want. And so I just did that just to have a simple one. And then, as I mentioned before, I will be just decorating everything on my own afterwards. This is just to show the idea. So the next step to do is to measure the pictures more or less to give you an idea of how much you're going to need to cut. You can also just do what I did and just basically measure the outside of the pictures and draw a crisscross, which is more or less what you're going to follow to cut the holes. All you need to do to cut the holes is use two pages, but you can just make the pattern on the one because that's all you need. And then you're going to want to get something to put underneath because you are going to be using your knife to cut a cross or an X shape through the middle of the square in order to fold the edges in. So yeah, or else you're going to cut into the other pages of your book, which might not be something that you want. Anyways, once you've cut your X shape, it's really quite simple. You just fold everything back to make a window. Trim off any excess, but keep some of it there because that helps to reinforce it. And then glue down the flaps. Then you repeat the process on the other window. If you need to make any adjustments to the size or whatnot, do that. Keep checking. If you need to do any inking, ink before you put in the acetate. And then you're going to just take your acetate, make sure it's the right cut down to the right size to fit in, and you're going to glue it in. I used my bow stick, I think, just super glue and like one of those silicone glues because it works better on acetate than PVA. Double-sided tape should work as well, I believe. Just whatever works best for you. So glue the acetate down on one side and then add more glue and glue it down on the other side and make sure that the two pages are well glued and placed together. Always checking, of course, that your pictures are in the right spot. The next thing that I did was to add the images to go on each side. So you're going to want to make sure it's placed in the right spot, and then you can add the image how you want. You can simply just glue it down. You can make it into a pocket, into a tuck spot, into a flap. This one I just made into a side tuck, but on the other ones I had one that was a flap. It came in and out, and then I had like a little side pocket as well. So you can just pick how you want to do it, and you just glue in your image and put it under a weight like I did, let it dry, and then once it's dry, you repeat on the other side. For the second image, I decided to make it flip up. So I just added a little piece of scrap paper. I folded it in half, mitered the edges a little bit, glued it onto the back of the image, and then glued it onto the uh, background paper, and then stuck a weight on it, of course, as you do, in order to make sure that everything dried flat. Obviously, always checking and making sure that your image works in the window. And that's it for this video. I hope that this gave you a few ideas on how to use the pages in your altered book to make it your own. I'm sure there's like hundreds of other ways to make flaps and tucks and all sorts of things that I didn't think of or didn't find. Happy to have some suggestions given to me in the comments below if you like. Um, Let me know what you think, and if you do seem to like my content, it would be amazing if you could share it with some friends who you think might be interested, or subscribe and hit the little notification button to keep up to date. In the meantime, happy creating. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye.